It's my great privilege right now to introduce you to Jason Perkins, hailing from Brisbane, but Adelaide and the States, and his beautiful wife, Kristen, who's here with us this morning as well. I met Jason as part of what's called the Irresistible Churches Network that Jason leads. But more than leading a network, Jason is one of the greatest encouragers and just leaders in at least my sphere of people and influence that I know. I have learnt so much from him and the network that we are a part of, and I just love the way that he cheers on the local church. And so what better message than to bring right now? And I just want to just say thank you publicly for everything that you have done for our church and the churches in this city. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you so much. Let me get really quickly out of the way, a little housekeeping. My accent is all over the place. So if you're a speech therapist in the room, I just want to save you the pain. You won't be able to fix it, okay? It's because of a very kind of variety of places that I've lived. I'm a dual citizen. My wife says that I actually have the Russell Crowe version of the Australian accent. I've just spent far too long overseas. I'm also a PE teacher by profession, not a professional pastor or professional Christian or anything like that. So if you're brand new to the whole church thing, just want you to know that just because they fly you in from some other part of the country and they strap one of these to your face, it doesn't mean that you have following Jesus figured out. Let's be honest. It just simply means that you are trying to figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus every day, and you just want to come and share maybe some of the things that God is teaching you about that today. So let's just get those things out of the way up front. I mentioned that I was a PE teacher by profession, which is why I love playing games. I have a 4-year degree in whistle blowing, and I am damn good at blowing a whistle. Although I didn't bring my whistle with me today. I would love to start, though, by playing a game, if you're able. And if you're watching online, by the way, you can play along as well. Could be awkward in that cafe while you're watching to stand up and play along with the TV screen or the computer in front of you. But if you're able to, would you stand right now? I'd love to play a game. This game is actually called Face Off, and this is the accessible version of the Face Off game, all right? Now, I'm going to explain how the game works. The reason why it's the accessible version is because I'm going to bring up on the screen in just a moment a couple of pictures, and I'm going to ask you which of the two pictures you think is the least accessible of the two, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick the picture that you think is least accessible, and you're going to face in the direction, either left or right, whichever picture you think is the least accessible, okay? Now, this first round is going to be like a practice round, and that means that everybody will get to play in the second round. But typically, it's a game of elimination. So if you pick the wrong picture, or if you just don't pick a picture, if you're still spinning around, once I count down from 3, you'll be eliminated from the game, so you'll have to be seated, which means it's not a game for every generation. There are some generations think everybody should get a trophy at the end of the game, but this is not. Be careful. Be careful. You may be laughing, and you might be in that generation, okay? Be careful. And you may be wondering, why would I even play a stupid game in church? Well, on the line are some killer pythons. And these, by the way, are the new version of the killer python. They're both sweet and sour, so it's a combo deal. So that's the only reason really to play the game, to be honest with you. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and bring up the first of the pictures on the screen. Okay, we have a couple of restaurants. These are some of the most exclusive restaurants in the world. One of them, by the way, has a year-long wait list. So guys in the room planning date nights to this restaurant, you got to think ahead, like a year ahead, okay, to be able to reserve a table. If you think it's the one in New York, you're going to face that direction. If you think it's the one in Bristol, UK, you're going to face that direction. And again, if you're still facing me, you normally would be eliminated, but this is the grace round. But unlike Jesus' grace, it ends here. And second round, that's a bad church joke, by the way. If you're not a church person, I apologize. But it will end after this round, okay? So we're going to give you 3 seconds. And my good friend Bella up the back, by the way, give it up for Bella, doing an amazing job up the back. Those of you watching online, Bella's helping you out with all the graphics and stuff today. And people like Bella and Jack, they make people like me look way better than I really am and sound way better. So we should thank them this morning. All right, you got 3 seconds. In 3, Still looking around. Don't look at the person next to you. 3, 2, 1. The answer is, Bella, it is Bristol, UK. Okay. Wow. I was not expecting that response, which tells me, Josh, it doesn't take much in Mandurah to get people excited on a Sunday morning. It doesn't, okay, sorry, just kidding. All right, next round, let's go to the next slide. Okay, most exclusive health clubs like fitness center, most exclusive in the world. These are two of the most exclusive. If you think it's the one in London, you're going to face that direction. If you think it's the one in Zambia, you're going to face this direction. And if you're still facing me after 3 seconds, this time you will be eliminated from the game, all right? So in 3, better be quick, 2, 1, the answer is, all right, it was Zambia, okay. Still a very excited part of the audience over in this section here, all right? Now, here's the deal. Some of you, I notice, you're kind of waiting to that split second until the answer comes up on the screen. That's called cheating. And of all places, like really, church? Of all the places, like this may not, no, I'm just kidding, totally kidding. All right, next round. Most exclusive neighborhoods in the world to live in. Okay, which one do you think is more exclusive than the other? Do you think it's the one in Brazil, or do you think it's this place, the country club in the United States, all right? And again, you got 3 seconds to make a decision. In 3, some of you are like spinning at the moment. I've seen a few people in temporary indecision there. I see that. 3, 2, 1. The answer is, okay, it's the country club. All right. Now let's see how we're doing. This section, percentage-wise, you guys are doing really, really well. Give yourselves a big round of applause. This section, percentage-wise, you're doing okay. That's good. And this section doing very, very well. All right, I don't know what it is about the wings, but must be something about the sides of the auditorium. And maybe you're still online, standing up in that cafe. We want to say a big congratulations to you as well. All right, so next round, let's talk about the next round. When it comes to shopping, 2 of the most exclusive shopping centers in the world are up on the screen, and they happen to be in the same country. All right, which one do you think is more exclusive than the other one? Like harder to get into, more exclusive. If you think it's the Dubai Mall, you're going to face that way. If you think it's the Mall of the Emirates, you're going to face this direction. And again, if you're still facing me, you'll be eliminated. In 3, 2, 1, the answer, Bella, is the Dubai Mall. All right. Okay. We just eliminated, I feel like, the whole cheering squad over here. They all lost on that particular round. All right, now, listen. The next round, I want to switch it up a little bit, okay? We've been talking about which one is more exclusive than the other, or which one is less accessible, which one's harder to get into. Here's what I'd like to do. In this next photo, or 2 pictures, I'm looking for you to decide which is the most accessible, okay? Not least accessible. We're kind of flipping the question on its head. Which of these 2 is more accessible than the other? And the category is racket sports, okay? When it comes to racket sports, you got ping pong, you got badminton. Which one of these is the most accessible, key question, which of these 2 is the most accessible racket sport on the planet, all right? And you've got 3 seconds to answer the question. In 3, 2, 1, the answer is, it's actually neither of them, which means you're all eliminated from the game. Thank you for playing. This is just an old PE's teacher's way of kind of cutting the game short and not having to give away the snakes, to be honest with you, just being able to keep these for yourself. Actually, no, this part of the crowd, you guys were incredibly celebratory. So, congratulations. You can either share those or you can keep them to yourself, whatever you'd like to do. Here's the truth. The most accessible racket sport on the planet today is actually this sport, this little paddle. Few people in the audience. I see some people shaking their heads. Yes. This is the great game of pickleball. And I am a pickleball fanatic. That's why I carry a pickleball paddle with me in my carry-on luggage. It actually goes in my laptop bag with me everywhere I go. because wherever I travel in the world, I love to find places where you can play pickleball. And I've found, by the way, in Perth, several places where you can play pickleball. I'm excited by that. Not so far down here in Mandurah, although maybe you guys should put in some pickleball courts on the basketball court that you're building for the community in a few months. That'd be great. Pickleball is an incredibly accessible sport when it comes to racket sports. In fact, it's the most accessible, which is why I love it. In fact, a few years ago, my wife and I, we moved back to Australia in 2019 from living in the US for a number of years, and I was so passionate about pickleball that I used to drive over an hour to find places to play pickleball. Eventually, I told a few of my friends in my neighborhood about it, and they said, Perko, why don't we just go to a tennis court and you teach us how to play? And so we did. The next Tuesday, 3 of my friends and me making the 4th, we went down and played pickleball for a couple of hours, and they loved it so much that they said, hey, what if we came back next Tuesday and played pickleball again? Well, guess what? Every Tuesday afternoon for about a month, 4 of us got together and played pickleball. Well, the word got out. And within about 3 months, we had over 60 people showing up on a Tuesday to play pickleball. We had to mark out more lines. Eventually, we called our council, found an old derelict 2 tennis courts, turned them into 8 pickleball courts. They allowed us to flip them. And we actually established the Morton City is where I live in Brisbane, the Morton City Pickleball Club, of which I was the inaugural president of the club. Yeah. At the very beginning, we sat down, this little committee, because we had to get ourselves established, and we said, hey, what's the goal of our pickleball club? What are we setting out to do? And we decided in a very simple goal, we said, we want as many people in our community to discover pickleball and fall in love with it. As many people as possible to discover pickleball and to fall in love with this incredible sport. Now, about 6 months in, I noticed one Tuesday afternoon, I showed up and I overheard a conversation between a few of the pickleballers. And I heard a couple of these younger pickleballers who were pretty good at the sport. They used to play tennis. And they began to discuss the fact that they probably need, or we as a club, need to establish a Thursday night pickleball session for all of the people that were a little bit better at pickleball than the others. So no longer was the Tuesday session good enough for them, but they wanted to start, quote, kind of a secret Thursday session for the people that were a little bit better than the others. And I thought to myself, in that moment, how quickly things change. 6 months ago, you'd never even heard of pickleball. And now, all of a sudden, you're an elite pickleball player who doesn't want to tell the Tuesday newbies about the sport because you want to play competitively on Thursday night. Now, our club has gone on to do great things, continues to be a place where we find people discover pickleball and fall in love with it. But now we have players that are winning tournaments and they're ranked in the country and all these crazy things. But we still have this goal of helping people discover pickleball and fall in love with it. Now, I want you to think for a moment, just for a moment, of a place where you have had a little bit of trouble kind of getting into a group. Think of your place. In fact, I'll bring up on the screen a number of different options here. Maybe it was a football club, or maybe it was a cycling group, or maybe you had trouble getting into the chess club at school. I hope this doesn't trigger anybody's like middle school experiences. That's not my goal here. But I want you to think about a time in your life where you wanted to get into something and it was a little bit challenging for you. And I want to actually give you a moment to turn to the person next to you. It's kind of like group therapy on a Sunday morning. Aren't you glad you came? And I want you just to share with the person next to you. All the introverts in the room are like, why did I come this Sunday? I have a guest speaker. They should have told him we don't talk to each other during the talk. I get it. But turn to the person next to you. I'm going to give you 30 seconds each just to exchange your little story or your example of a time in your life when it was tough for you to get into a group of some sort, all right? And your time starts now. All right, if you haven't had a chance to switch over yet, let the other person share. Now's your time to do that. You got about 30 seconds to go. All right, I think seems like most people have had a chance to share their experience. If you're watching online, maybe drop in the chat. It was that basketball team in middle school that wouldn't let me play with them in the playground or whatever. Go ahead and share with them online what your experience was like. Here's what I've discovered. Through pickleball and a number of other organizations I've been a part of, here's what I've discovered. That over time, the gravitational pull of every organization is towards insiders. People that have already shown up. The pickleball game, people that were already in the club. Over time, it didn't even take 6 months for the gravitational pull to go from we want as many people in our community to discover pickleball and fall in love with it as possible. It didn't even take a year for us to start thinking about ourselves, for us to start turning towards insiders. Now, I'm a guest here today. So, by the way, if you don't like this conversation today, good news is I'm not here next Sunday. Come back next Sunday. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. And I don't mean to step on too many toes this morning, but I do want us to be honest. I want us to have an honest conversation. So if you don't consider yourself a church person, maybe you're watching online for the first time ever, or somehow you stumbled across this link. I don't know what your journey of faith looks like. Maybe you're in the room today and you decided to come to church for the first time or the first time in a long time because somebody was dedicating your grandchild or something like that. I don't know what your reason is for being here. But if you don't call yourself a church person or typically would characterize yourself as a follower of Jesus, you can kind of tune out for a moment, okay? You can just take a break from the conversation. I'll let you know when to join back in. But for everyone in the room that would consider themselves a church person or following online, you would say, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus. Can I be honest with you for a moment? Can we be honest together? Not only is the gravitational pull of every organization towards insiders, but typically the gravitational pull of every church tends towards insiders over time. Over time, we start thinking about not those outside the church, but all of us that kind of are in the club here at church. We start maybe even talking about things in the car park or maybe the music or different things that we really want tailored more towards our needs, and we stop thinking about those that are not here yet. My wife and I, Kristen, my beautiful wife, is down here on the front row. She actually is a counselor. She has her own private counseling practice, which is why I said it's kind of like group therapy this morning, talking to your friend next to you. If you need private therapy, by the way, see her after church. That's totally fine. Maybe that middle school triggering basketball team came up for you and you need to chat. I totally understand. Here's the deal. We travel all around the world as a part of our role with the Irresistible Church Network. And sometimes our role is to come to a church and maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday after the weekend services, the team at the church will get us together and they'll say, hey, Jason, Kristen, what did you notice over the weekend when it comes to our church being able to connect with people that don't typically go to church? And I typically respond with, well, I don't want to tell you what I noticed, but I'd love to ask you a couple of questions. Oftentimes when I ask the question, here are some of the responses that I get from church people or church staff. They oftentimes will say things like this. Well, that's just the way we do things around here. I'll ask like, hey, I noticed this. Tell me a bit more. Oh, well, that's just the way we do things around here. Or they'll say this one, we've always done it that way. And I'm like, I know, because it felt very much. In fact, when I walked in, it had kind of a vintage 1960s feel to it when I smelled the room. Like, we've always done it that way is sometimes the response. And this has been a challenge, by the way. This issue of being gravitationally pulled towards insiders, this has actually been an issue for the church from the very beginning. I want to take you back to the very beginning of the early church. I want to take you back. In fact, it was only a couple of Sundays ago that in the church calendar, we celebrated something called Pentecost Sunday. And Pentecost Sunday just simply means this. It's like 50 days after Easter when Jesus was crucified, when he was buried, and he rose again from the dead. It's about 50 days after Easter. And on Pentecost Sunday, that particular Sunday, the church kind of took off like wildfire on that Sunday. In fact, it wasn't long after Pentecost Sunday that the church left Jerusalem, where the thing kind of started on Pentecost Sunday, where thousands of people were coming into the church. They were joining the club, so to speak, kind of like our pickleball 6 months. Thousands, not quite, hundreds of people joining our club. But on Pentecost Sunday, the story tells us that over 3,000 people joined the club on that Sunday. And then they started going into all different parts, all around that part of the world. And not long after that, they had a moment, kind of a come to Jesus moment, where people discovered, we're starting to think about insiders more than those that are outside the church. In fact, in Acts, which is one of the books of the New Testament, it's one of the books that tells the story of the early church. If you're not familiar with the Bible, it's the second half of the Bible, the New Testament. After the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you probably heard of those. There's a book called Acts. It tells the story of how the church began. And in Acts 15, we actually read a story of the very first church kind of business meeting where they addressed the first time that they noticed the gravitational pull towards insiders. Take a look at what Luke, the guy who wrote the book of Acts, records for us in Acts 15. He says this: certain people came down from Judea to Antioch and were teaching the believers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. Let me put this into 2025 English for you. Unless you stop by the medical van, you can't join the pickleball club. Which means there were only women probably interested in joining the pickleball club. Most of the dudes are like, I'm out. I'm not going to the van. I have no interest in joining the club. That's what they were saying about the church. That unless you have a medical procedure, quite literally, out in the car park, could you imagine for a moment? This is awful to think about. But you came to church this morning here at Eastlake. There's a little medical van outside in the car park, and before you can come in, you have to stop by there, which is why Eastlake would probably be predominantly women that attended Eastlake. That's what these guys were saying. Now, I want to show you a map of the area so you get a concept or a context of what was going on. You'll notice in Judea, it says a group of people around Jerusalem. That's where the church began on Pentecost Sunday. They went down, which actually looks like they went up to Antioch, but it's an elevation thing, all right? Jerusalem's higher than Antioch. Even though they were going north, it says that they were going down. The story continues. It goes on in the next verse. There we go. This brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. Now, sharp dispute is like Old English for they were throwing hands, probably. If you can imagine, medical van situation, they're probably not just having a comfortable conversation about it. They're in sharp dispute and arguments with them. So Paul and Barnabas were appointed, along with some of the other believers, to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and the elders about this question. So they're sent to Jerusalem to go and talk to the people that were there at the very beginning on Pentecost Sunday when the whole thing started. Go talk to the leaders about this issue. The church sent them on their way. And as they traveled through Phoenicia and Samaria, they told how the Gentiles, those that were outside the club at the time, non-pickleball players, they told how they had been converted to actually be a part of the church. They had become followers of Jesus. This news, it says, made all the believers very glad in these parts of the world. Let's go back to the map really quickly. Notice as they were coming from Antioch to Jerusalem, passed through Phoenicia there, along the sea, through Galilee and through Samaria, that's where they were telling these stories. And then they arrive in Jerusalem. When they came, it says in the next verse, when they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and elders, to whom they reported everything that God had done through them. So they're telling the whole story. You won't believe what God is doing at the pickleball club. It's amazing. No. You won't believe what God is doing up in Antioch. We're talking about Jesus to people, and people that are non-Jews are coming to follow Jesus, and Jewish people are coming to follow Jesus. It's incredible. And then Luke continues with the story. It says, then some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up and said, now, quick kind of context for you. The party of the Pharisees were the group of people that actually put Jesus on the cross. Some of them, miracle, actually started following Jesus when he rose again from the dead. But they were so entrenched in their ways of doing things that they said the Gentiles, people outside the club, must go to the medical van and are required to keep the law of Moses. To which the apostles and elders met to consider the question at hand. And then this is the response. After much discussion, Peter got up and addressed them. Now, Peter, by the way, back to day of Pentecost, Peter's the guy that stood up and preached about Jesus being crucified, buried, and coming back to life, and thousands of people joined the church on that day. Peter was the one who was sharing on that particular day. So Peter responds, he says, brothers, you know that some time ago, God made a choice among you that the Gentiles might hear from my lips the message of the gospel and believe. He continues, God, who knows the heart, showed that he accepted them by giving the Holy Spirit to them just as he did to us. Now, don't miss what Peter's about to say. This is absolutely critical. He says, now then, he did not discriminate between us and them, for he purified their hearts by faith. Now then, why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of the Gentiles a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have been able to bear? Guys, what are we doing? We can't even keep up with these standards. Our grandparents couldn't keep up with the standards that we're putting on these people. And yet we're asking them to keep a standard that neither our grandparents, great-grandparents, and us couldn't keep? What are we doing? Goes on, he says, no. In fact, I think he probably yelled at the crowd, no. He says, we believe it is through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved, that we get to come into the club, that we get to be a part of the church, just as they are. The whole assembly became silent as they listened to Barnabas and Paul telling about the incredible signs and wonders God had done among the Gentiles through them. And then, when they had finished talking, James, who, by the way, had a little bit of clout in this meeting, he was the brother of Jesus. So if anyone kind of could speak into what's going on, like who could be a follower of Jesus and who couldn't, who should be in the club and who shouldn't be in the club, are you allowed to play on Tuesdays or can you only play on Thursday? Like, this guy knew what he was talking about. He says, when he had finished, James spoke up and said, brothers, listen to me. I love this statement. James says, it is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Come on, guys, don't make it difficult. Just because people can only play at a certain level on Tuesdays doesn't mean we create some elite group of people that know the Bible more than the Tuesday people on Thursday nights. It's like, no, we shouldn't make it difficult for the people that are turning to God. So here's a question for you this morning. As a church, how do you see the church making it difficult for those that are turning to God? Even if you're not a church person this morning. In fact, even if you are a person that doesn't consider yourself a church person, you could tell us, how is it that the church is making it difficult for people that are wanting to turn to God? Here's what I've discovered, though. It's really easy for me to point the finger at the church and say, oh, here's how the church is making it difficult for those that are turning to God. It's very easy for me to do that. But the reality is, I sometimes am creating hurdles for people. I'm a big fan of the Olympics. I mentioned before, I'm a PE teacher by profession. One of my favorite events to watch in the Olympics is the 100-meter hurdles or 110-meter hurdles. Here's a picture of it. It's kind of humorous. It's part of the reason why I love watching it. Probably let you in on a little bit of my kind of psyche. I love watching people fall down, not get hurt. But I love it when they're in the full sprint of the race and maybe somebody will clip one of those hurdles. Here's the truth. Sometimes inadvertently, I'm creating hurdles for people that are turning to God. By the way I communicate, by maybe even the way that I expect people to behave, all sorts of different things that I do. that create hurdles for people that are turning to God. So my question for you this morning is this: how am I, how are we creating hurdles? For those of us that call ourselves followers of Jesus, how are we creating hurdles? Not the church, but how am I creating hurdles for those that are turning to God? As you think about Missions Month here at Eastlake, I'm convinced of this one big idea. I'm convinced that Mandra needs a church that removes all the hurdles. It needs one. And it doesn't mean that you point the finger at maybe the team that lead the church here, people that are on staff, and say, hey, how are they removing hurdles? But it begins with us, those of us that call ourselves followers of Jesus. It begins with me asking the question, how am I creating hurdles for people that are turning to God? And then how am I going to begin removing those hurdles? Because Mandra needs a church, which is simply a group of people that love Jesus, on mission together, to love this city, no strings attached. Mandra needs a church that removes all the hurdles. And by the way, if you're not a follower of Jesus yet, maybe you don't consider yourself a church person, maybe you stumbled across this talk online, I don't know how you landed here. Good news is this: God, through the person of Jesus, removed all the hurdles for us. He took away every hurdle. You might think, wait a second, Jason, you don't know my story. You don't know how my life has transpired. I'd say, you know what? That hurdle, Jesus removed it. You'd say, no, Jason, I feel like I need to get to a point where my life is kind of back together a little bit before I can start following Jesus. Jesus would say, no, I removed that hurdle as well. No need to get your life back together. Just start following me. So this morning, as we kind of land the plane, I want to invite you. If you've never said yes to Jesus before, because of some hurdle, whatever it is in your mind that is stopping you from following Jesus, I want to invite you this morning to say yes to Jesus today, because he's removed every hurdle stopping you from following him. Maybe you've still got questions about faith, not sure how everything lines up in the Bible. These are all hurdles. Jesus has removed all of those. So don't allow any hurdle to stop you from following him. Would you join me this morning in bowing your head and closing your eyes? I want to lead you in a simple prayer, especially for those in the room that are saying, I want to start following Jesus. I recognize he's removed all the hurdles. I'd love to lead you in a simple prayer, a way for you to say, I want to follow Jesus today. I want to begin following him today because he's removed all the hurdles. Here's what you can say in your own heart. You don't have to say this out loud, just between you and God. He knows what your heart is saying. Just say, God, thank you for removing all the hurdles. Just tell him, God, thanks so much for removing all the hurdles. Tell God, I know that I haven't measured up. I haven't reached your standard. God, I know that I haven't measured up. But thank you for removing all the hurdles. Thank you for sending Jesus to die in my place to remove all the hurdles. Just tell him that. And then thank him for coming into your life. Say, God, I want to invite you into my life. Forgive me of my sin. God, come into my life. Forgive me of my sin. And I want to begin following you. And then thank him in Jesus' name. Amen. Father, I lift up every person this morning in the room or watching online that have said yes to Jesus today. God, I pray that you would encourage them, that you have removed all the hurdles so that they can begin following you. God, I pray for every person in the room or watching online that's already a follower of yours. God, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we've heard today. What hurdles do we need to remove? And then would you give us the courage and the strength to